Hey there, GFN family. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are very excited because we have a special guest. Her name is Beth Messick, and she is the executive director at Jasmine Road. So today we're going to be asking her some questions because we want to be able to partner with Jasmine Road. We want to come alongside them, and we want you guys to be able to learn a little bit more about their organization and what they do. So I'll kind of hand it over to Beth here for our conversation. So can you tell us a little bit about your story and also your involvement with Jasmine Road?
Sure. Well, first I want to say thank y'all for having me. I'm really grateful to be here with you today. And I first heard about human trafficking probably 6 or 8 years ago. My background is in helping marginalized women reclaim their lives and social work and counseling and things like that. So I heard about human trafficking and that this was something that was happening in Greenville, and I thought, well, how does that happen? I'm from Greenville. I've lived here my whole life. And I knew, I'd heard about a girl that was in a specific area in town, and my husband and I decided and brought him along with me, that I was going to go out and find this girl and meet her and just see what was going on. And so we went out to the streets and kind of hung out, and after a couple of weeks, we met this one particular lady. But we also met a lot of other women that were out there just walking around, and you could tell that they were high and on drugs and that kind of thing. And as we began to see what was going on out there, these women would, we'd be talking to them, and they would say, "Hold on a minute, I'll be back in a few minutes." And they would jump in a car with a random stranger, and they would come back 15 minutes later, stuffing money in their bra, and they would just continue the conversation like it wasn't happening. And so, I began to think, like, what is this and what's going on? And we would see, we met dope dealers and pimps and people that were hanging around, kind of forcing these ladies to do what they were doing. And I just became really passionate about how do we get these women off the street. And I began to understand that these ladies were either coming from or going to the Greenville County Detention Center. There was a lot of criminal activity, a lot of charges that they were getting, and they would go to the detention center and get released, and then they would go right back out to the streets. So as we met these women, what we began to understand was it was multiple women, but women with one story. And that story was a story of childhood physical abuse, sexual abuse, came from very traumatic backgrounds, poverty situations, and they really didn't know any different. So that was very eye-opening to me to try to begin to help these women.
Yeah, that would be very eye-opening.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Of course, yeah.
Just about so I guess my next question is, then how did you take that experience and get involved in Jasmine Road?
So after going and seeing and meeting these women, I was able to get professional visitation privileges with the Greenville County Detention Center. So I founded an organization, and it was basically just what my husband and I did. We'd take hot dogs out there on Sunday, and they call us the hot dog people. And so, but anyway, I began to build relationships with these women on the streets. And so began to go into the detention center and talking with them about alternatives and different places and that they could go to for help when they got out of the detention center. And so in doing that, I kind of got hooked up with Triune Mercy Center, and they already had someone going into a male that was going into the detention center working with people as well. So kind of began partnering with Triune, and had heard about a group from Triune in Christ Church that had gone to Thistle Farms in Nashville, Tennessee. And Thistle Farms is over a 20-year organization. And basically what they did was they took 5 women that had come out of prison, they put them in a home, and they said, "What do you need?" And they started providing services for these women. So my husband and I went up to Thistle Farms pretty reluctantly because what we had found out about this model is there's no authority in the home. In other words, these women are living independently, they're running the house, they're going to work, they're getting therapy, that kind of thing. And I thought, I know these women, and they're going to burn the house down. This is not going to work. And we went up there, and what we saw was I met a lady that was one of the very first graduates from Thistle Farms over 20 years ago, and she was there working in a professional capacity with Thistle Farms. And I met a lady that graduated 15 years ago and 10 years ago. And what was so interesting to me about that was these ladies were graduating, however, they were continuing to stay in community there at Thistle Farms. And Thistle Farms had opened social enterprise initiatives. They had a restaurant and some other products that they were making and selling those. So that gave the women purpose. And so, it was just recreating community. So we came back to Greenville and we thought, wow, like we want to do this here. So I, actually began working at Triune Mercy Center while we were building Jasmine Road and partnering with Christ Church and trying to figure out what do we do. So we met for about a year and a half every week talking about plans for opening this restoration home. And then we began to gather some community support, and we were able to open our doors in May of 2018 to the first 5 residents of Jasmine Road.
Wow,
Yeah.
That's amazing. How awesome.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey to see these ladies and what they can accomplish and what they can do when you are able to house them safely and help uncover what their gifts are and their strengths.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah.
How cool.
Could you tell us a little bit about the human trafficking in Greenville and how GFN could possibly partner with Jasmine Road?
Yeah, I think human trafficking has sort of evolved our understanding of it over the last few years, and I think there's also a lot of misnomers out there about what trafficking actually is. But the federal definition of human trafficking is someone that's engaged in the commercial sex trade through force, fraud, or coercion. Force, I made you do it. Fraud, I tricked you into doing it. And coercion is a lot more subtle to help, to kind of define what that coercion is. But also, anyone that's under the age of 18 that's involved in the commercial sex trade would be considered a trafficking victim. So many of the women that we work with at Jasmine Road may come to us and say, I'm not a trafficking victim, and not identify as a trafficking victim. However, they do meet that criteria by the federal definition. They were selling themselves in order to get drug money, and someone was forcing them to do it. But in their mind, these traffickers are really crafty and had built relationships with them to where these women would do whatever they wanted them to do. So it's just a really, it's a really complicated thing, I think, to really wrap your mind around. But as I began to understand what that was and what was going on in Greenville, this is really something that's not new. And my first experience with a trafficking victim was back in the 90s, early 90s, and I met a girl that I was working with pregnant teenagers, and a girl that was 13 years old, and she was pregnant, and she was a 5th grader at an elementary school. And you think, like, how in the world, what is this? How does this happen? And the reality of that was that her dad didn't have enough money for rent, and he was selling his daughter to be able to have drinking parties, and people would come over. And I mean, that's human trafficking. And one of the things about that is that's what is considered familial trafficking. And familial trafficking is being trafficked by a family member of some sort. It could be your mom, it could be your dad, it could be an uncle or a cousin. And we see a lot of that in the state of South Carolina. In fact, I don't know if we're still number 1 in the nation for familial trafficking, but there was a time when South Carolina was number 1 in that. And I've had a lot of experience with women that come to Jasmine Road and say, my mom sold me when I was 9 years old for crack cocaine on the streets of Greenville. And it's just shocking to me. Like I said, I grew up here my whole life and had no idea that was going on. And another thing too, when I think about that, I think there's kind of a false narrative about trafficking when you see these Facebook posts about the creepy guy at Walmart followed me around and he's going to snatch my children, and we see all that kind of stuff, and people share it. Don't go to Walmart because there's human trafficking there, or don't go to this place because Cherrydale was another one. There's human trafficking going on in Cherrydale. All those reports are completely unfounded by law enforcement. And when people on Facebook start sharing all this stuff, it really does a big disservice to those of us trying to help these victims, because a victim sees that and they don't identify with that narrative, because that's not what happened to them. They weren't snatched or they weren't taken. And another false thing I think that people think of with trafficking, just by the name of trafficking, you think of movement, like movement from one place to another. And although movement could happen in trafficking, and sometimes does happen, you could be trafficked next door, from the house next door, and never ever leave that house. So it really doesn't have anything to do with the movement of people from one place to the next. So, and those are some of the misnomers I think that we hear in the community about human trafficking.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think those are some of the things that I've heard is, if somebody's being trafficked, they are moving, and like you said, it can be next door. So I think there is a lot from what you've said, that there is a lot of misunderstandings or misconceptions that take place. So thank you for shining the light on some of those, because I think just from, personal experience, I kind of wonder, like, when I hear about these things, I'm like, man, I don't know that I can do anything about this, because it seems like something that sometimes we could label as being too big to help out with. So
Right.
Do you have any suggestions of things that we could do to try and help out with human trafficking, whether that's awareness or getting involved? What would you suggest?
So, I think when you think about human trafficking, and one of the other things that just popped in my head that's kind of has been said about trafficking, that we live on the I-85 corridor. We're between Charlotte and Atlanta.
Yeah.
In my early days of training people on trafficking, I said that as well. And that leads you to believe that all these women are coming up and down the interstate. Although that is happening, and they are, and I've worked with many victims that have been trafficked from state to state to state. Again, that's another misnomer, I think, that when you hear that, that propagates that movement.
Right.
Issue.
Yeah.
But back to your question about what you can do about trafficking, we get that question all the time. And how can I identify it? What can I do?
Yeah.
And that we're really moving towards throwing out, well, if someone has a tattoo, they could be a trafficking victim. Or if someone looks lonely, or they look scared, or they have an expensive pocketbook, they could be a trafficking victim. All of those are true about a trafficking victim, possibly, but those really aren't necessarily the markers of that. And so, we're leaning more towards stories. I mean, what is the story? You encounter someone that that looks like something's going on. Are you in a position that you can find out about their story? And I'm not saying that necessarily you need to approach that person, but try to begin to understand the story of someone that could be vulnerable. And we see a lot of the ladies that come to Jasmine Road were in foster care as children, and they ran away from foster care a million times. And so multiple runaway from foster care, I mean, that's a big vulnerability to make someone vulnerable to trafficking. If there's a child that doesn't have parents that are present, or that's in the DSS system, that kind of thing, that is a vulnerability to trafficking. So I think what you have to remember about traffickers is that they are preying on vulnerabilities. They're looking for weakness. Where can I find a weakness? And a lot of what they're doing is they're reaching our children specifically through social media. And they're reaching adults that way as well. But they're looking for people that are posting sad things, or they're looking to build a relationship with your child on social media. And we think, we live in a digital world, and it's great that we have access with a computer to the world. But the reality, I think, is that when you give your child a device, whether it's a phone or computer or whatever, you just gave the world access to your child. And so they're coming in, from those kind of avenues and building relationships with children. And that's how you hear about these stories of, a child that ran off with someone that they didn't know that were 3 states away. And they arranged a meeting time, and they came and they picked them up, and off they went. So there's a process, it's called grooming. It's a grooming process that traffickers are using to really get in their heads. Because if you think about it, it's a lot easier to control somebody that goes with you willingly versus someone that is going with you against their will.
Right.
And so not to say that there's not, and I know of some cases where people might have been locked in a basement or locked in a room and weren't allowed to leave. Those do happen. But the majority of what we're seeing in trafficking are women, children, men, boys that are going willingly with traffickers. And it's because if you think back to the example I gave you about a woman that has come through our program that was sold when she was 9 years old on the streets of Greenville for crack. For her, some guy that comes along and says, "Hey, baby, what you need? I'll take care of you," and starts paying her any attention. That's a better deal for her than a mom that sold me. And you can imagine the brokenness in the relationships that she experienced as a child. So because of those vulnerabilities, then it's really easy for someone to fall into trafficking, so to speak.
Right. Wow. Thank you for sharing all that with
Sure.
us. It is very insightful.
And one other thing I would say too, what Jasmine Road does, we heal women that have gone through trafficking, and so we're down here downstream pulling the women out, downstream,
Yeah.
but helping upstream where before this actually even happens. And the way to do that, I feel strongly about is mentoring a child, mentoring someone, a kid that needs attention or needs skills. That is one of the insulating factors I think, in a lot of the women we work with, there was no caring adult in their life. And no one that was there to pick them up, when they fell. And so, being that person for, maybe your children's friends, or getting involved in a mentoring program, things like that really help so that kids aren't vulnerable to trafficking by building those relationships.
Right. That's an excellent idea. Something that I think every single one of us could take time to do, to just invest in the children and just other people in our lives.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Thank you. That's
of
awesome.
course.
Beth, you had mentioned a lot of these women have a lot of trauma in their background.
Right.
Could you maybe share your story with us?
Yeah, so the way that I got involved in working with human trafficking and what I'm doing, I was a victim of childhood sexual abuse, and that happened to me a long time ago, and my dad stepped in and took care of it, and things like that. But it left a mark on me, and I always felt like something was wrong with me, or that I was different, or that kind of thing. And I spent a number of years trying to figure out where was God in all this, with what happened to me. And, I tell the story about, my Bibles in my 20s, and I went through about 3 Bibles, and it was like the Bible of a desperate woman, trying to find out answers to the things, that happened to me. And I was abused as a child, and then again as a young adult, and then had another experience when I was in college. And so those sort of stacked upon each other, and I thought I was worthless. And so I went through some years of counseling and got the help that I needed. But my heart really goes out to these women that are out on the streets, that a trafficking victim will tell you that trafficking is not the worst thing that ever happened to me. And that's kind of really hard to digest when they say that. But you're looking at some, most likely there's been childhood sexual abuse, and there's been physical abuse, and they're a domestic violence victim. And 100% of the women that we work with are on drugs in some shape. And that comes from trying to numb the pain of what has happened in their lives. So there's a lot of drug addiction and a lot of trauma. And these women get to a point where they don't know what to do. And so they get comfortable with this lifestyle of trafficking, and seem like they're willing participants in that, from the prostitution standpoint. But one of the things that we always say at Jasmine Road is prostitution is the choice for those with the fewest choices. And so we see the ladies that have, they say I've chosen prostitution, but really they had no other choice. It's a survival choice. So we've seen that so much that we actually developed a curriculum that is called a choice curriculum, and it actually educates people. We used the real life stories of the women in our Jasmine Road program and the things that had happened to them, and we are able to walk people through scenarios. We've trained churches and different groups on this choice curriculum, and you're able to walk through those scenarios and be offered choices. And it's really interesting because we do about 4 rounds of this, and to see that you wind up by your choices. You either wind up in jail, you wind up out on the street, you wind up with criminal charges. You might wind up beaten by your trafficker, and a lot of different things like that. So it really paints a picture of how this could happen to anyone if you had this certain set of vulnerabilities for that to happen to you. So again, my heart just went out to those women, and I can sit across from women in the jail and work with them. And although my story is different than your story, I know what it's like to feel like you're worth nothing, and I know what it's like to be so immobilized by shame that you can't move forward. And so, I love that God has given me this opportunity to offer this pathway out of the darkness for these women. And if I can do it, they can do it. It's a lack of resources that they just don't have those resources, which is why Jasmine Road, we're a 2-year long-term residential program. And so we're a housing first model. And so what that simply means with housing first is that we believe that providing safe and stable housing for women is critical. It's the critical first step, because if they don't feel safe, you can't begin to offer the resources and begin the healing process for these ladies. And then we partnered with Bond Secure St. Francis, and they provide 100% free medical care for the women, mental health, and as well as physical health. We have dental partners as well, and then they go to therapy and do a lot of different trauma-informed different kinds of therapies, and art therapy and horse therapy and things like that. And we do financial literacy with them. a lot of the women that come to Jasmine Road dropped out of school when they were in the 7th grade or 8th grade. They didn't finish high school, so they're required to finish their GED. And if they finish their GED, they or graduated, then they have the opportunity to go back to school. So we have 2 of our graduates that we're extremely proud of that started Greenville Tech while they were while they were at Jasmine Road, and will graduate in December with a degree in Health and Human Services.
Wow.
So I know it's been fantastic just to see when you provide these women with a safe place. And one of our ladies said, "This is the first time that I can remember that I didn't have to sleep with my shoes on." Because out on the street, they wear their shoes because they got to run at a moment's notice. But you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and the clothes, food and shelter being the very first things that they need. That's where Jasmine Road comes in, and we start meeting those needs. We don't charge for a woman to come to Jasmine Road, so it's all free. And while they're staying at Jasmine Road, also, the other part of this equation, we want to heal them, but also we have to give them job opportunities so that they don't return to life on the streets. So we've created social enterprise. And so we have Jasmine Kitchen, which is our lunch cafe, as well as a candle making and a jewelry making enterprise. So when the women are in the program after 6 months and they've done a significant amount of beginning scratching the surface of the healing, they can begin working in our social enterprises. And so they stay with us for 2 years. And the last year of their program is really focused on more working full time and being able to save their money so that they can launch back out into the community as productive members of the community. And with all the community partners that we have, United Ministries and Favor Greenville and Julie Valentine Center, and I just can't name them all because we have tons of them. But what's so neat about that is for us, those community partners create a multiple safety net for these women so that they have built relationships there, and so that they are less likely to return to life on the streets. So it's not just Jasmine Road. I mean, our community has been so wonderful in coming together to help Jasmine Road with this project. And we couldn't do it, we couldn't do it without the community behind us and the community providing the resources that these women need in order to help them with their lives.
Right. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, it's great to hear about your guys' program. We've kind of just been, researching it, watching videos and things because we were so interested. So again, we're so glad that you can be here to share with us.
Well, it's been a fantastic, I wish I had brought one of our graduates to talk because, their whole lives are changed. And one of the girls yesterday said, Jasmine Road didn't give me back my life. I got a brand new life. And to see them thriving, one of our graduates is now working for me at Jasmine Road and working with our residents, which is amazing. And they're working in Jasmine Kitchen, and so it's just and making candles. We'll be launching our new candle scent. We have our first candle scent was called Belonging, and we launched that at our luncheon last year in October. And this year, October 28th, is our luncheon coming up. And so our second candle scent, I can't tell you the name of it yet because we're going to unveil it then, but we're really excited about it because it really, epitomizes what these women have been through at Jasmine Road and how they tap those inner resources and strengths. It's just amazing to see. One of the things I always say is there is no us and them, it's just us. And we're just working together, we're working alongside these women. We provide the opportunities, they do all the hard work, and we just partner with them in that. So it's really neat to see the genuine relationships that form not only with the staff members and the residents, but also with our community that's coming alongside. And we have volunteer opportunities where for driving the women to different appointments, and working at Jasmine Kitchen is another volunteer opportunity. We have volunteers that could help in our office space and things like that. So there's a lot of different volunteer opportunities. But it's really neat to see when the volunteers come in that really have had such a different background than these women, and to see them form genuine friendships and relationships that last beyond graduation. And that's, we're really just creating community for these women and welcoming them back into the Greenville community, which is, they've been here all along, but they've been hiding in the shadows, and they've never felt like they're a part. So it's really a beautiful thing to see them engage in community in Greenville. So we love that part.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah.
How excellent. So can you tell us a little bit more? Is there a way that if people in our church would like to join the luncheon, is there a way that they can do that?
So our website's jasmineroad.org, and so you can go on our website. We have a luncheon page on the website, so they could click on that and host a virtual thing for your friends, or you could do it by one-on-one. We also have some lunches. Jasmine Kitchen will be preparing lunches for the luncheon, so we're excited about that. So all that's described on the website. So that was one way to get involved with Jasmine Road. We also have a second house that we're working on, and so we will have that, we hope, up and running in next year in 2021.
Awesome.
So we've identified the house, and we have, with the help of Bond Secure, and we also have 4 major church partners that have come alongside to provide some pretty significant funding to help us get this house off the ground. So we're really thrilled to be able, it'll in effect triple our capacity. So we have 5, one house with 5 women now, and we'll have space for 8 additional women in the new home, as well as 2 studio apartments above a 3-car garage. And so those will be transitional living for some of our graduates that need a little extra support to help launch them back out into the community. So we're really excited to get the second house off the ground. We've had over 75 or 80 applications. This number just keeps going up since we opened 2 years ago for women that want our service, and we have 5 beds. So the need out there in the community is really significant to be able to help these women. And we also partner with Thistle Farms through a national network. So we have a national network of about 35 other sister communities. So we're able to place women in other communities or vice versa. We do that sometimes as well. But the need for our second house, we're going to be needing things like with 8 women, we'll need 8 single beds, and we'll need 8 dressers and 8 lamps and 8 alarm clocks and those kind of things. So we have a Wayfair registry. And I think that link is on our website as well to help outfit that second house, as well as we're taking donations specifically for furniture, single beds and dressers and things like that for that second house, because we'll have to outfit the house once the renovations are completed.
Wow, that is so exciting.
Yeah. So that's another, yeah. And then the other thing I would tell you, we have needs from toilet paper all the way up to, significant financial needs to do what we're doing. So there's lots of room in between. But you think about, like, these women run the house, so toilet paper, cleaning supplies, those kind of things. Whatever you need in your house, they need in their house. So we're always collecting donations for those type of things as well.
Okay, that's so great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that we can have some of that information, so that way, all the people who are watching today can also have different ways to get involved. So
yes, that's exciting.
That's exciting, yes. Is there anything else that you would like to share, or maybe just give any sort of encouragement to the people in our church, just moving forward and getting involved with Jasmine Road?
So I would just say that you take advantage of the opportunities that God puts before you. I mean, that's how I got involved in this, by going out and handing out hot dogs on the streets of Greenville. I had no idea it was going to lead to this. But being sensitive to hearing God's voice, and not everybody's called to work with these women,
Mm-hmm.
and we understand that. Not everybody's called to give money, and we understand that. Or so God has gifted I believe each person in your congregation with unique gifts and talents that can be used in a useful way. So really searching your heart and seeing what those are. And for me, this journey with Jasmine Road has literally been a step in the darkness. Like, I didn't know what the next step was, but I knew God called me to the streets, so I went and did, I went there first, and then I found this, and then, oh, well, wait a minute, and and then God opened up, different other avenues and doors. So, being willing to hear God's voice, I think, and following the things the steps that He puts in front of you to do what you need to do. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's been great to just hear from your own personal life to those who are the women who are at Jasmine Road. It's been great today to hear the ways that God is moving and working. And again, just thank you so much for being with us and sharing your heart and sharing more about this incredible organization.
Well, I'm so grateful to you guys for listening and for being interested in Jasmine Road and being willing to share the story, because there's much to be done, particularly in this area, with human trafficking and helping these women, get off the streets and find safety and find home, find a place to belong.
Thank you again, Beth, for joining us today and for taking time to share about your organization. And thank you guys to all of our GFN family and beyond who has taken time to join us and to continue and learn and grow. We will get you guys some of the links to the different things that Beth has talked about today, whether it be links to the Luncheon, the Wayfair Registry, or other ways that you can get involved. We will really appreciate that. So we hope you guys will have a great rest of your day, and thank you again for joining us.